So, how are you on this very rainy October morning?
Do you have rain? We haven't had rain.
Not rainy down there.
It's grey and murky, but it's not actually down. It was a little bit drizzly yesterday, but no, we haven't had proper rain for a little while, really.
Yeah, it's been lashing it down today. It's been dry up until now, just for the UK weather forecast of what's currently happening. Yeah, it's just been kind of autumn setting in, I guess, but it is.
It's we're going through the change, aren't we? In the slow, gradual decline towards winter.
I know we started this podcast in kind of coming out of winter, didn't we? So
it was, but it was flipping now. Cold, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was really cold. Yeah, but I've noticed I'm having to switch the heating on in my workshop more now. So
right. I have no control over the heating in my workshop. It seems to be permanently on.
Yeah, you've just got like a comfortable, balmy temperature constantly set.
It does seem to be about 24 degrees all year round. I don't quite know how they manage it, but
that's quite warm.
It is quite mild, which is why you'll pretty much only ever see me in a t-shirt. But
yeah, I bet. No, mine's normally the other way. I struggle to get mine even in the summer. It rarely gets above about kind of 18 degrees in there, because in the winter, right. Because it's quite well insulated, like all around, because when I was putting the new wall in and everything, I made sure everything was insulated.
Yeah. So
it tends to hold the heat quite well, but it never gets particularly warm because I've only got a little fan heater in there.
Right.
And then it also tends to hold the cool quite well in the summer. So it always seems to stay around 18-ish degrees.
It is fairly cool in summer, actually. It's not too bad, but when the heating's on in the building, I just have heating pipes that happen to run through my space, and somebody put a loop in, so it's just up at ceiling level, and it just heats. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Free heat.
Free heat, basically. Yeah. Well, I'd like to think I pay for it through the outrageous service charge that I pay, but yeah.
Yeah. So what have you been up to?
Busy being busy. I've got some. I'm doing another spraying series on video and for YouTube, and it's all sort of entry level, sort of low end. So I wanted to see if you could get up and running on spraying for less than 100 quid all in. So I've made a 30 quid spray booth, and I've got a 30 quid pair of extractor fans. And astonishingly, I've got a 30 quid HVLP sprayer as well, which I'm testing, which is exceptionally good. It really is. For the money, it's incredible.
I'm looking forward to seeing that, because how is that even doable? 30 quid for a functional sprayer.
You pay 20 quid for one of those little solenoid things that you might use for, spraying your shed or.
And they're terrible,
and they're pretty grim, noisy as well. Whereas this is a genuine, honest to goodness, proper little turbine and a gun, and you actually get two paint pots. I go on about this at length in the video, but to get a spare pot is incredibly useful, because obviously you can keep the paint in one and use the other one for cleanup.
Yeah.
Whereas if you buy a regular HVL, I've got a little Erlex one from way back, and it was really hard. In fact, I gave up trying to get a spare pot for it. And they wanted, back then, more than the price of this little sprayer just for the spare pot. So yeah, it's a fun thing to play with, and it works remarkably well. So yeah, that's been keeping me busy. I was in this morning, did a quick coat of paint on something.
And you're not getting splatter, or like you're getting quite even coat from it?
Oh, very even, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very interesting, interesting.
At some point I've got to do a comparison between that and the Graco. I mean, they're different animals, but the little HVLP is very, very good. I've used it for a couple of jobs, and without any issue, without any comment whatsoever.
Wow. Presumably you can't use it upside down then?
No, it's tube fed. But again, you can get a reasonable range of angles on it. I was surprised how much you could move the gun before it started to spatter.
How does that work on the grey coat? Because it can't. You can use the grey coat at any angle.
It's airless, so it actually pumps the paint through. It's basically it's a pump rather than a.
There must be angles wherever it's sucking the paint from.
No, because you squeeze the air out. It's got a little flexible bag, a flex liner.
Oh, so it literally kind of the bag compresses.
Yeah, and then it's all paint. So it doesn't.
I was wondering that. I thought, well, even if it sucks the paint out, or however it does it, but yeah, that makes sense. If it's literally the bag's kind of compressing like a crisp packet that's getting the air sucked out.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly that.
Right.
Yeah.
Clever.
Good stuff.
Clever.
Yeah. So that's been keeping me busy, and you've got a new toy by the sounds of it. You've got a new compressor.
Well, my workshop is in absolute disarray at the minute. I've never had my workshop in such a mess, and to the point I might make that a video for tomorrow actually, because I can do like a quick before and after. Right. Because people always say like, "Oh, your workshop's always really tidy," and it's like, yeah, because you're only seeing one corner of it on a video.
Yes.
And yeah, at the minute it's just. And the thing is as well, I don't know if you've found this, but on videos, even when the workshop is genuinely a mess and you're tripping over everything, it never seems to come across like that on videos for some reason. It always looks tidier than it is.
Yeah, it's the exact opposite of how things used to be when I was a photographer, because you could spend, your morning tidying somewhere up that you're actually taking pictures in, and if you miss something, it would still stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
Whereas I think if there's a general layer of mess and rubbish around, people tend to sort of gloss over it a bit. I think video is more forgiving as well.
Yeah, but I put a picture on my Instagram, I think, was it last night? I can't remember, but it was just a quick snap of the workshop as it is. And then literally, I mean, you can't move in my shop for tripping over stuff. There's just stuff. Every single bench is covered. I've got like the new compressor sitting in the middle of the floor in a corner at the minute, and you can't get round that area. I've got boxes of stuff waiting to be unloaded and all sorts, and wood piled up. But on the photo, it doesn't look that bad.
Yeah, it's weird.
There's genuinely not a square inch of bench space anywhere at the minute. But so yeah, I'm doing a big kind of, well, not a big, but it's upgrade to workshop version 2.1, I would say. So I'm sorting out a lot of the niggly things that I've been wanting to sort out for a long time.
Upgrade, yeah, we're familiar with that, yeah. So
new compressor, which I just picked up the other day. Went for the little Swan 30-litre job from Axminster, which nice. I was horrified when I turned up at Axminster and found out it had turned into some sort of food warehouse place.
I saw that, yeah. You put that on Instagram, yeah.
I almost got up to the door and it was like, where's all the tools gone? And why is it all full of like boxes of cornflakes and, and meat?
It's a new offer, Andy. You get a free compressor with a box of cornflakes now.
Because the logo colours were the same kind of red and white logo.
Oh, right.
So if you didn't...
Actually, I didn't think that, yeah.
I didn't really... it's just I go there automatically. I don't go that often, probably only every 6 months or so. Otherwise, I would be very, very skint.
Yeah. I've never been, I must say, I've never been to an Axminster store.
Oh, kid in a sweet shop when this one opened up.
Yeah.
And I'd always been a bit concerned because it never seems that busy for such a big shop with so much stock.
Yes. It's always a worry, isn't it?
It never seemed... I mean, it's massive, it's like the size of a B&Q or something like that, but just full of speciality woodworking tools. And I'd always crossed my mind, well, are they going to make enough money on this little retail part to keep things going?
Yeah.
And then when I turned up and it turned into a food shop, it was like, clearly it hasn't worked out. And then I thought, well, before I head home, I'll do a quick search. And it turned out they'd literally just moved around the corner to a much better location, because the new location is kind of near Screwfix and a whole lot of other kind of more industrial
tradie sort of places, yeah.
Stuff. So the new place is awesome. So I went there.
Fantastic.
Picked up my compressor. Finally picked up a new grinding grinding station. Because the grinding station that I've got at the minute is just a little Black & Decker thing that was a hand-me-down from my dad.
Right.
And it must be best part of 60 years old, 50 or 60 years old, I would have guessed. And I've been wanting to get a decent one for sharpening for a long time. And so I finally sorted that.
What did you get?
It's just a
sharpening station.
No, it's just an Axminster, just a little hobby series grinding, like twin grinding wheel thing. But I've gone for a CBN wheel for one side,
right?
Which is something that I've been wanting to sort for a while. And then while I was kind of at Axminster and sorting all this stuff out, I thought, well, I might as well get that at the same time. And coincidentally, Stumpy Nubs on YouTube had just done a video about his CBN grinding wheel, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with CBN or...
No.
It's basically like the grinding wheel is a solid metal block, and it's impregnated with is it carbon? What is it? Boron nitrate or something. Hold on, let me just look it up before I tell you a whole load of rubbish.
As if you do that, Andy.
CBN. Cubic boron nitride.
None the wiser, but anyway.
Cubic boron nitride, and basically, it's like a solid metal block grinding wheel. They're beautiful. They're lovely looking things because they're so shiny and sparkly.
Ooh, shiny! Of course.
Main reason I bought it, obviously.
Of course.
But the big thing about them is that your tool doesn't get hot while you're sharpening.
Oh, okay.
So
you can't accidentally burn the tip off or whatever else.
Yeah, you can't accidentally completely destroy your tool while you're putting a regrind on chisels and things like that. So, and they effectively last forever. So they're expensive. It's about £100 for the wheel, but it's a lot cheaper than having to buy new chisels all the time if you accidentally overgrind it and destroy the tip.
Those £8 little chisel sets don't buy themselves, do they, Andy? Let's be honest.
They don't, obviously, exactly. But the big thing is it just lasts forever as well. So you don't need to go back to your wheel and kind of flatten your wheel out and so I've been wanting to get one of them for a while, and as I say, Stumpy Nubs did a great video on
interesting
on his setup, which is that can be one of my picks of the week. So we'll include a link to that in the show notes. And then I'm also upgrading the lighting, and then there was a joinery workshop that had gone bankrupt, which I've picked up a whole load of junk.
You've been picking through somebody's bones, somebody else's dreams and hopes shattered, and now you're just sort of...
This was the hopes and dreams that had been shattered 6 years ago, maybe longer, and had already had the bones picked clean.
Fair enough.
And effectively there was only just sawdust left.
Yeah, okay.
And but there was a couple of, like, I managed to get some nice strips of mahogany which had been just left and probably no one had noticed them.
All right.
And some nice strips of beech as well, which I've no idea what I can use them for, but I figured, well, I can probably... I'm hoarding.
Your hoarding instinct is kicking in there, yeah.
I can't let mahogany... Because this is all destined for the tip.
Yeah.
And literally the whole lot's just going to go into landfill, what's left of this joinery workshop.
Yeah.
It was a case of anything that you don't take will end up in landfill, so take whatever you want type thing. So lots of boxes of screws, and there was hundreds of boxes of Phillips screws, and because my workshop's a Phillips free zone, I couldn't take them, even though they were quite good quality Phillips screws, but I couldn't bring myself to put them in.
No, fair enough.
So as a result, my workshop's just an absolute tip, but I need to kind of get on with another display job that I've got booked in, and it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing of, I need to get the workshop up and running again, but realistically, I've probably got a couple of weeks' work, because I'm also sorting out dust extraction as well, which is another thing. Try and come up with a better way of doing things, getting some blast gates installed and all that. And then... But I don't think I'm going to have time to get all that done and get this job done in time. So I think I'm going to have to do this job first and try and...
So now you've got to shove all the other stuff to one side and work around it. It's
I have no idea what I'm going to do with it.
Small workshop woes.
It is, yeah, it is. So what sort of stuff have you been building?
I had some shelves and things to do, fairly humdrum little bits and pieces, really. 2, 3, 4 sets of shelves. I've got a sort of spare room study with a desk and occasional bed base to build. They've just had the quote approved for that. I've got a couple of double wardrobe with top box and a big set of shelves to do, which I've got to start next week. More of the same painted white MDF boxes, basically, which is what I do. One of the guys I know, I did some birch ply shelves for a firm of architects and designers in the same building as me. And I was just, because I'm painting, I'm sort of over there for 10 minutes while I spray something. Then I've got to get out of there for half an hour while it dries. So I'm back and forth a bit. And he caught me crossing the road the other day. So, I want to talk to you about something. I've got a job, thought of you. And it turns out it was for him. And it's 2.5 meter high doors, internal doors for his house. I thought you'd be really interested. It doesn't need to be anything fancy, but I want some really nice wood. And, actually, I don't want to do this. I just want to, just not set up for that at all. And he seemed quite disappointed when I turned him down because, you can imagine what it's going to be like. I'd have to clear everything else out. I can only do one at a time because they're big old things. And I just don't know when I'd fit it in. Oh, there's no rush. Yeah, but you're going to want it, before this time next year, aren't you? And I'm just not.
And was he after solid wood or?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then it's dealing with twisting the wood and getting wood that's decent enough quality.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
The more that I'm looking down the solid wood route of things, until you can find a supplier that you're 100% confident that the stuff they're going to supply is going to be decent quality, I think that's a very difficult area to break into, to do.
Well, it's got to be for internal cabinetry or joinery doors and things. It's got to be dried. It's got to be dried to the same sort of humidity as the interior of the house. Because if you deliver something that isn't the same relative humidity, it's going to start twisting and moving.
Yeah.
So I've, what do you mean? I just don't want to get involved, to be honest. It sounds like a project too far for me anyway.
It's a tricky one. And I've been, and as you say, it's like setting everything up for all the mortises and tenons and, it's a completely different way of working to what you do. You would probably have to make a lot of new jigs for everything, and
it would probably be a way of getting the big domino paid for on a job.
Yeah.
But then I don't do that kind of joinery typically, so I don't really need one. I don't know. I'd say didn't. I think he expected me to be all excited about working in natural timber, and all I can think of is all of the problems.
Yes,
in a very small space. I mean, I could probably build it, but I probably might have to cut it up to get it out.
Yeah, well, this was a similar thing. Was it in the after show last time, or was it in the main show?
Yeah, you were saying you had a big, the potential for a big, scary job.
And it doesn't look like it's going to happen for 2 reasons. One, it overlaps with another job from a regular customer that I've got booked in, and it's just, there's no way that I'm postponing that job.
No, sure.
And so the only way I would be able to do this is to do it, try and fit it in later in the year somehow. But even that's going to be a challenge around other stuff where people have been queuing up and they would effectively have to jump the queue.
Yeah.
And the second problem is the cost of it. And basically the customer has turned around and said, "Oh, it's too expensive," which is no huge surprise. Basically, I briefly mentioned it in the after show last time, I think, that it's a customer wanted a great big solid hardwood feature panel for a commercial premises. And it's a giant thing, over 4 meters wide and about 3 meters high. So
that's a big old piece to do in 2/3 of a double garage, isn't it?
So I would have to make it in sections that could then be all joined together on site. But it all had to be made out of. They wanted ash because their designer, their interior designer, had come up with this kind of feature wall display.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, I wonder if this is something that you could knock up. And I said, it's going to be expensive. That's a lot of wood that you're going to need for this project. And I worked it out because it basically, the way the designer designed it, it was just going to be seeing the edge grain of the wood,
right,
not the face grain. So if you imagine 4 meters wide and having however many boards together, and I worked out that you're going to need I think it was 215 boards glued together edge grain wise to fill up the 4 meter gap, I think. I need to sanity check the numbers there. Either way, it's a lot of hardwood, and the cost of the wood alone was going to be best part of six or 7 grand, you know. But interestingly, and my hardwood supplier had come back with a price of £30 a metre for planks of oak, which I don't know if you...
That's pretty good.
Really? The last time I bought solid oak was about £10 a metre.
What size, I suppose, is the...
150 by 25 finished.
I'd have to check.
So kind of floorboard size-ish. And the last time I bought American white oak around those dimensions, it was coming in about £10 a metre,
right,
so about £25 per 2.4 metre length or thereabouts. But this was coming in at £75 for one length.
For a single board.
For a single 2.4 metre length of oak, which...
I do it so rarely, to be honest, Andy. I'd have to check back with my notes to see what I paid last time, or have a look on my local suppliers to see what they do. But
and it's fine, because ultimately the cost's going to get passed off to the customer anyway, but it's basically, it's blown the quote out the water, because I'd based on roughly what I paid last time plus a bit extra to cover a little bit for inflation, because I don't often buy large quantities of solid oak, but I didn't account for it going up more or less 3 times, threefold in under a year.
No.
But it'd be interesting to hear what... Okay, so 150 by 25 finished dimensions of American white oak. Price per metre. What would you pay wherever you are in the world for that? That would be an interesting thing for people to...
It would.
Let us know via either Instagram or Twitter or email.
Yeah, I mean, let's give those details a quick shout out, because I've had a couple of emails to me personally again, which is not a problem at all. But if you do want to contact us, at Measuring Up PC on Twitter is a good way to do it, or on Instagram at Measuring Up Podcast, or the contact information for email is contact@measuringuppodcast.com. Will reach us or any of those ways.
Yeah, and if you literally just tag Measuring Up PC in a Twitter comment, we will see it and we will reply to you. So if you do...
Is that how that works? I've never...
That's how it works. And
fantastic.
Yeah, you know, so you will get a reply if you just tag Measuring Up PC on Twitter, and we will get back to you. So
amazing.
Don't forget. So yeah, any exciting emails that you've been getting then?
We had a great one again sent in to us. I'm just looking to see how much 150 by 25 mil American white oak is. Yeah, we had a great question from Jamie Berman, who runs Felixstowe Carpentry and Joinery. He sent it to me personally. Says, you know, he tried to send me an Instagram message, but it was too long. You can stack them up and do them in several parts. And he couldn't find an email address for the podcast. Fair enough. He says he loves the Festool cheap tool things that I've done. And he says, while he doesn't own any cheap tools, he'd love to hear us talk about whether you'd choose a new or possibly lower quality machine or an old or possibly higher quality machine for the same cost. And what this came about was it took him best part of a year to decide which panel saw to go for. And it was between him choosing perhaps a Fowler or a Martin that would have been 20 grand, 15, 20 years ago, but could be bought for about 4,000 or 5,000, or would he go for a new Axminster industrial panel saw, which is about 5 grand? And he says he asked the question on a few groups on Facebook. Yes, the F word. And he reckoned about 90% said go for the older machine, which is interesting. We swapped a couple of emails back and forth, and I likened it, perhaps unfairly, a little bit to picking up a £10,000 Ford Fiesta versus a classic car. So much depends on the provenance of the older machine, doesn't it? Do you know where it's from? Do you know where it's been? How has it been treated? And I think I personally, whilst the older industrial machine sounds like a better proposition, I think I would personally go for something newer and with a warranty if it was my hard-earned money that I'm spending. And it's an unfair comparison, I know, to do the classic car versus the new Fiesta kind of thing, because obviously there's a lot more going on in a car than there is in a panel saw. But at the same time, a 15 to 20-year-old panel saw is going to be reasonably sophisticated. We're not talking about a 1960s or early 70s Wadkin or something, which is just a big lump of metal and a spinning disc. There's the potential for some quite sophisticated electronics and things in there. And I think I'd want to be sure that you could still get the bits for it. I'd want somebody to set it up for me as well. I think I'd want a bit of hand-holding if I was spending that kind of money on a tool of that sort of size and caliber. What about you?
Yeah, I'd tend to agree. I think it would depend how much of a bargain it was, I guess. If you are getting something that's going to do the same job as the new version of the tool but a quarter of the price, for example, then fair enough. But if the new version of the tool is going to do exactly the same job and give exactly the same finish, but it's going to be around the same price, maybe a little bit more expensive, but you're going to have a warranty and you're going to be able to get parts, if, as you say, if something goes wrong. Yeah. To me, it's a no-brainer to go for the newer tool, because the implications of that tool going down, if it's central to your workflow, and if you don't know the full history of that tool and how well it's been looked after, and the other thing when you're buying second-hand is that it's very difficult to get a gauge of whether the tool has any problems until you've been using it for maybe best part of at least 2 or 3 weeks, I would have said, maybe even a couple of months, before you get into every single nit and grit, every single bit of how that tool operates, and then you suddenly discover that, it's bevel cuts, the angles just aren't correct, or
perhaps even longer if it's an operation that you don't do frequently, if it's something you only do occasionally, or say you wanted to put a dado blade on it, and you discover later on that there's some kind of issue with it, that it doesn't handle that well, or whatever. Yeah, I would personally bite the bullet, I think, and go for the newer machine, even if it's potentially of a lesser quality. At least if you're buying from a reputable firm, then you'll get a degree of hand-holding, a degree of backup, a degree of service with it, which I think would be invaluable. As you say, especially if it's a panel saw, it's going to be central to your workflow and to you earning your living.
Especially on such a big purchase like that, where it's not as if, if it goes down, you've got a big problem where something that's the hub of your workshop has failed, and it's not exactly something that you can just shove in the boot of the car and nip down to your local B&Q and pick up a new,
No, absolutely. I mean, who if you've got a 15-20-year-old Felder, who do you call if it goes wrong? I suppose you can only call Felder, can't you? I mean,
Yeah.
and they'll say, "Is it under warranty?" And then their eyes light up when you say no. Yeah, tricky. Yeah, like yourself, I would tend to go for new.
I mean, it depends on the tool, obviously, because things like routers and stuff, generally a router is a router and you can switch it on and get a fairly quick idea if it's a decent brand.
Yes, Jamie did say same would apply to similar tools. Are you better off buying a 10-year-old Festool router or a new little own brand? And again, it probably depends if it's central to your workflow. I've got some, most of my Festool routers are old, and most of them I've bought used without any problems at all. On the other hand, I've just got a little Katsu trim router, which is a very cheap knockoff of a Makita clone, and it works great. But if it stopped working, I'd just bin it and use one of the others. It's not central. It's a convenience. It's not a central, a major part of the workflow, a major part of something I want to do.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I mean, for me, probably track saw and table saw are probably the most key things that I would have a big problem if they stopped working. And absolute worst case scenario, I could drive down to Axminster and buy a new track saw. And probably I could do the same with the table saw. It wouldn't be for my setup because it's all kind of relatively small stuff.
Yes.
I could probably get up and running again within the day. So I wouldn't necessarily lose any. I wouldn't necessarily lose any money on the customer job. But for something as big as like a huge panel saw, or great big big wide sanding machines and stuff like that, where it's going to wipe you out for the best part of a week trying to arrange transport and things to either get it out your shop or get a new one or get someone in to repair it. It's just not worth the risk, I don't think, but maybe... I
agree, and I do wonder if... Jamie said that he'd asked on groups on Facebook, and I wonder how many of the other respondents were actually in the trade, rather than people who have slight fetishes about older, high-quality gear, as a lot of woodworkers seem to have a bit of a passion for ancient cast iron and all that sort of stuff. Andy did say as a follow-up that he bought the Axminster. They had it on sale for $4,000, so we saved a bit. He's had it for 6 months and he absolutely loved it. So, yeah, good stuff.
Which I think that's probably the right route to go down, I think.
Well, I don't know if there's a right and wrong, but certainly it seems to be what we would have done.
Yeah.
If you've got the money for it, then buy the new one. Because it's still going to be a decent machine. It's not quite the same as buying a little router versus a used Festool one, because the little router is always going to be fairly cheap and cheerful. You are buying a decent industrial machine as opposed to the high-end industrial machine, I guess.
Yeah. Unless you're going to get a major bargain and it's worth the risk. If you're going to save $3,000, then if it breaks, are you going to lose $3,000 as a result of the repair time? Probably not. So I don't know. It's a tricky one, but I would be tempted to go for new. But yeah, I have no problem buying secondhand for smaller tools where it's not the end of the world if it breaks, and they're relatively easy to test as well. As I say, you can check if there's play in the spindle of a router without even switching it on.
Yes.
You can switch it on and check that it just feels right and sounds right, and generally it'll probably be okay. And you take your gamble on that sort of stuff, and I would say probably 95% of the time, as long as it's a decent brand, you'll end up with a tool that'll continue to have a very long lifespan. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, for me, the compressor is a perfect example of something that, I only ended up with a hand-me-down compressor by chance. It was kind of being given away and stuff from another joiner who had retired. And I kind of trusted that it had been looked after, but realistically, he might have got it secondhand. I don't really know the history of it at all. So it's always been on my to-do list to get rid of that, because I don't trust old compressors one bit. I've heard too many horror stories of compressors exploding and things. So for me,
it just doesn't bear thinking about, does it?
Yeah, for the cost of a compressor, and this Swan one is probably the most expensive 30-litre compressor that you're going to get.
Yeah, they're certainly not cheap, are they?
And it was about 300 quid. You can certainly get ones for about a third of that price, but I don't know if I would trust the quality of it. And for something that's going to be switched on and running pretty much all the time that I'm in the shop, I want something nice and quiet, nice and reliable, which is going to do the job. And and if there is a problem, I can just drive down to Axminster and say, yeah, this is broke, can I have a new one, please? And yeah, so to me, that's worth the trade-off of getting a new one. So for a compressor, I think it's, unless you really know the history of it, that it's been looked after and cleared out regularly, and it's not worth the risk of buying old tools like that.
So what do you use your compressor for then? Because I mean, I've got a compressor, but it gets switched on, twice a year kind of thing. I literally wouldn't know what to do with it.
It's mostly for my brad nailer.
Right.
So I've just got a little boss stitch 18 gauge that I use it with in the shop, and I've got a little portable one that I take on job sites with us, and it's mostly for that. I've never made the switch to battery nailers.
Okay.
I've heard too many horror stories, although I know that you've had I know they've moved on a fair bit over the last probably 5 years or so, and it's maybe something I need to revisit, but I like the air tools,
Yeah.
Makes a cool noise when you... and I also use it for blowing dust around my shop.
Yeah, that's nice.
Very regularly.
Yeah.
The thing is with air tools is that once you've got the compressor...
The tools are cheap, yeah.
Air tools they're so cheap. I've got a little die grinder, which equivalent of a Dremel, and that cost like 20 quid brand new for a brand new Bauer die grinder. I've got an air sander, which the air sander uses a lot of air, so you need I can't use that on a portable machine. That can only work on the 30-litre. But again, you can get a decent random orbit air sander for 20 quid or something, So once you've got the air, there's a lot of stuff you can do with it.
So how does the dust extraction work on that then?
Dust extraction? Dust extraction is another thing that I am revisiting at the minute.
The compressor conveniently blows air out of it. So
well, one of the things that I've noticed with this compressor, which I'm a little bit nervous about, is that the gubbins of it, the motor and everything, looks very exposed. Like you can see into the housing of the motor. You can see the motor spinning around. And it just concerns me a little bit about how well it's going to handle dust. So I'm going to maybe build an enclosure to keep it in with a bit of a filter on the front or something, just to keep the dust out of it. It does nicely say in the instructions not to be used in dusty environments, which, yeah, thanks very much.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yes, just for dentists' offices and that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Another nasty workshop use.
Although there are people saying that they use these compressors for airbrush use, which a 30-litre compressor for airbrush seems a bit excessive to me. But
I'm trying to think. It's I suppose it's if it's just you, yeah, but it might be a team of people working off the same compressor, and depends on the airbrush, of course.
Maybe a classroom. But the thing is, with this compressor, it's so quiet. I've never heard a compressor this quiet before. I switched it on. It was like,
is it
in some sort of warm-up mode? Is it in some sort of mode where it's going to kick in properly? But yeah, it's amazingly quiet. So once I've got it in an enclosure, I reckon you'll not even be able to hear it, which that'll be handy for if I'm recording and the compressor decides to kick in halfway through recording, which...
Oh, yeah, of course. That'd be a pain, wouldn't it? Gee.
Yeah, so at the minute I've got my compressor on a remote socket, so I can, if I'm recording, I make sure it's switched off and it's not going to decide to kick in at some point randomly. But yeah, you've got battery air nailers, haven't you? So battery nailers.
I've got both, actually. I've got a mostly electric. I started out, I do have an air nailer. It's a silver line, and it cost me all of 20 quid. And I've got to say, it performed faultlessly, because it's a 16 gauge rather than a 18. So it's a little bit heavier duty. But I've gone electric most of the time. I've got a Maestri nailer stapler, which is the Italian bulletproof things. Lots of flooring guys use those. And I've got a Spot Nails veneer pinner, which is 21 gauge. It's very fine. And I've got the two Ryobi ones. I've got a Ryobi 1 Airstrike 1 Plus. So they're like the DeWalt's. They're actually the battery that has a little compressor inside. So the battery fires up the compressor, and then it's an air-powered nailer effectively. So it's not using the battery to fire a solenoid or anything like that. The Ryobi 16 gauge nailer is okay. I wouldn't say it was worth the money, but the little stapler is really nice. I like the stapler is probably my favourite of them all. Still physically a big old lump though. The Maestri that I have, the mains powered one, is so much smaller. It's
something I need to revisit, because when I was looking a while back at potentially changing things over to electric and ditching the compressor, and all the cordless ones weren't getting particularly good reviews. Lots of jams, and it just like being a total nightmare, basically. Other than the gas cordless ones, which seem to be the route to go down. The ones where you get the gas cartridge to go with it.
Passload or Hitachi, yeah.
Yeah, the Passload ones, and that I looked into, but I just thought, I use an air nailer quite a bit, but not enough to justify changing everything over to going gas. And then I thought, what happens if you run out of gas halfway through a job and you've run out of cartridges? And, I've always got thousands of nails, but I don't like the idea of having to keep thousands of gas cartridges everywhere on the off chance that you run out. And I don't have to worry about any of that with the air nailer. And other than the running costs of the brads themselves, it's a very, very cheap tool to operate. There are no other running costs effectively, and the little compressor. And you know what it is, and I've had it on customer sites where it's been handy just to have the blower with us for various reasons. You've been doing a whole lot of joints and you need to blow the joints out with something and to get before gluing them up. If it's been something that I've wanted, or for example, a prime example is if you're using a trim router on site and you've done a round over on something and you've then got to paint it and you want to give it a good blow down outside before painting it. Again, having the blower around is really handy for that sort of thing.
That's what the vacuum's for, Andy, but anyway.
La, la, la. Not listening.
Not listening.
What, are you saying dust extraction at source?
Absolutely.
What?
All the time,
you
constantly.
You cut out there. What?
Yes, always. No, never use a tool without dust collection. Even the chisels.
I must admit that a part of what I'm doing in the shop is sorting dust collection, because at the minute, even just to use the track saw, I need to switch over my dust collection out of the table saw and onto the track saw, and then use like a host of awful adapters to get it to connect up, and it's just a massive pain in the backside. Yeah,
small handheld tools like the track saw, to an extent like a chop saw, and routers. I used my jigsaw the other day. While I was connecting the hose, I was thinking, I'm doing this mostly in hope rather than expectation, because the dust collection on a jigsaw is always terrible. But all those sort of smaller tools are best dealt with by a small Hoover type dust extractor rather than a big dust and chip collector. Whereas things like table saw, you probably need a 4-inch hose on it to get the proper dust collection from there.
My dust extractor has a 4-inch hose coming out of it, and this is kind of part of my problem at the minute with designing the new dust setup, is that so it's got a 100mm flexi pipe, which isn't very flexy.
Yeah.
Coming out of the dust extractor. But then the table saw, it's about a 40 mil or 50 mil.
Oh, right.
In fact, coming directly out the table, so it's not 100 mil. So I have to use like a host of adapters to kind of bring that down to the table saw size. And my new dust extraction, I'm just going to run 63 mil everywhere. And I think that'll be fine for a little shop like mine. I think I'll survive without the 100 mil. And what I would like is a tube coming down the middle of the shop that I can just connect anything up to when I need it. And whether it's a track saw or connecting it up to my router table or any portable tool, all I have to do is grab that tool, the tube that's hanging down, and connect up to that. And that's kind of my dream setup. And then I'll need a blast gate so I can switch between either that or the table saw.
Yeah.
And possibly the chop saw.
I don't want to
Go on, burst my bubble.
Yeah, I don't want to burst your bubble or anything, but I had that, and it was such a pain in the neck.
Don't tell us that. Well, I haven't built it yet.
Yeah, I had it was admittedly only 40 mil running, and in fact it's still there because I can't be bothered to take it down, running around the back wall of the shop, and I could sort of, had access points to it. And it was such a pain changing over. What I ended up doing was having effectively two extractors, and one of them fed off that sort of boom arm thing, which actually reaches most of the workshop, and that works well for me in my little space.
Yeah,
but, yeah.
I mean, for my central thing, it'll just be like a D27 hose or something connected to it. It's only a little hose.
Yeah.
Which will come down in the middle, but that'll run off. It's just I need some way of getting dust extraction over to my chop saw, which is over on the other side.
Yeah. And
I haven't really got anywhere to put a local, like, have a separate unit.
That's what I ended up doing. I just had a separate extractor dedicated to that and to handle that end of my huge workshop,
Yeah, but the thing is, these runs do end up getting quite long once even in a little workshop.
They do.
Once you've run them all around the corners,
sparring off them and things as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I might do is work out some sort of way of having a separate extractor for my chop saw, which is miles away from my dust collector in my tiny workshop, but having the table saw and my central dust pipe off the other extractor, and just having one blast gate to switch between them, and hopefully that'll do the job. But then you've got to look into, I mean, my dust extractor is just a normal filter bag type, basically a metal tin with a filter bag extractor on it. Right. And emptying it is a pain in the backside, and so I should probably consider going to some sort of cyclone, where it dumps the dust into a separate container so that it makes it much easier to empty, because at the minute, the drum where the dust ends up in is the drum that the 100 mil hose connects directly up to.
Right.
So to turn that upside down, you're kind of having to manhandle this giant 100 mil flexi hose that's attached to it, which ends up getting caught on tools and things when you're trying to turn the bin upside down. Either that, or you just have to get kind of a brush and shovel inside the bin to just manually.
You need an extractor to hoover that out with. That's
that would do it. Yeah,
hoover out the inside of your hoover.
A second extractor. So yeah, I've been debating making a cyclone thing for it to keep the dust separate from the actual main unit, and it would probably make it more efficient as well. But it's another job.
There's always other jobs, aren't there? Yes. Oh man, so many things you need to do. I just mentally going through my list in my head there of things that I want to do across the road there in the workshop, and never enough time between jobs.
I genuinely think that if I stopped doing all work for 6 months and just did jobs that I've been meaning to do in the workshop, like I still don't have a decent place for keeping all my router bits, just proper router bit organisation would be quite nice to have. There's just so many things that I could do. And as you say, it's just getting the time. But I guess this is how your shop evolves naturally around what you do, because you never get time to sort everything the way you want to have it. And it just evolves to the way that you have to have it to get the job done.
I've got my 1/4-inch router bits, little trim bits, I've just drilled 1/4-inch 6mm holes into, I've got shelves everywhere, and I've drilled into the edge of the shelf, and I've just got them stuck in there.
Yeah, well, I haven't
always
got mine.
Accessible. And I know exactly where they are. Just make sure you don't catch your head on them, because it doesn't hurt.
I bet you. Mine are literally in a pot, and whenever anyone sees them on YouTube videos, and they're fine, they don't rattle around in a pot, and I'm very careful when I put them in the pot. I don't put them in the pot and then shake the pot around, which you would think that's what I do when you read some of the YouTube comments about, you can't keep router bits in a pot. It's like, well,
actually, you can.
As long as you're not keeping them in a pot in the back of your van, they'll be fine. But in a stationary pot, in a bench, that's never getting, moved around. They're fine. They're not rubbing against each other.
Yeah. Storage solutions are a real headache, aren't they? I know there's the perennial what to do with your drill bits question comes up on Instagram all the time. And it is, I mean, there are so many drill bits to do so many different things in so many sizes. There's got to be a better way of storing them than keeping them loose in a jar or in one of those horrible flip-over containers that always seems to break at the hinge. I don't know what the solution is. This is a rhetorical rant, but it is a pain in the neck.
Do you keep yours in cassette things all nicely organised, or
no? In my, I've got one box which has evolved into a go everywhere sort of toolbox, but it keeps the two most used drills in there, and I've got a little strip of wood glued to the inside of the lid that's got the most used size. I use the Festool Centratec ones, so they only fit that Festool bit holder. And I've got the 3, 4, 5, 6 mil bits in there.
But do you have them? Are they separated out? So you can, if I said, "Can you pass me a 4 mil bit?" Could you just find one instantly?
Yeah.
So I have all my drill bits in one of my Stanley organisers. But it gives me one case, and I've got every type of drill bit that I ever need, and I've got them separated out in such a way that I know roughly where the 4 mil bits are. But then
they're in there somewhere.
Maybe it'll take us an extra minute to kind of check a couple of them, but you get pretty quick after a while at just glancing and knowing.
Most of the time,
that's worked pretty well in giving me a single case that has everything from a selection of Forstner bits and auger bits through to brad point bits and normal steel bits and everything in a single case.
Okay.
It's still not the ideal solution. That there are situations where, for the life of us, I know I've got that drill bit and I just can't find it, and it ends up being quicker to just buy a new one, and then you find it hidden behind a unit somewhere,
Of course.
Which, when you've got them all separated out, where the 4 mil one goes, where the 4 mil one goes, then you can see at a glance when a drill bit's missing.
Yeah.
And I think the trouble is with my setup is that I can find the bits quick enough, but if they're not there, it's not obvious that it's not there.
Yeah.
That's the problem with the way that I'm doing it. Anyway, drill bit organisation.
Exciting stuff.
There's a topic.
Again, all the stuff like auger bits, and because I use them so infrequently in Forstners and that sort of stuff, they tend to stay in the workshop. So they're just on a shelf in a particular place. So I know they are there somewhere. But the only ones I take with me are mostly wood bits or a few combi bits. The Bosch combis are quite good. And the spade bits, which are all in I've got like a chisel roll, but with spade bits in, which is quite handy way of keeping them separated.
I scored for loads of 5.5mm really nice quality Hilti SDS bits from this workshop. They were hidden in a corner, just ready to go in a skip. So if you want any 5.5mm SDS bits, I'll post some down to you.
I can't remember. I was going to say I can't remember the last time I used an SDS. Yes, I can, because it was to blat a couple of holes in my ceiling to hang my fan up, which is, but that was the first time I'd used it in a long, long time. Very rarely get involved in using an SDS, mostly because if I went near most of the walls that I'm trying to fix things to, if I go near them with an SDS, then half that wall's going to come down.
Yeah,
I virtually guarantee it.
Well, this is the thing with Victorian properties, but I don't know if it's like that. I'm assuming it'll be a similar sort of thing. You'll either run into a section of the wall that's so soft that you can literally just stick a screwdriver into it and you don't even need a drill.
Yep.
Or it'll be brick that's as hard as diamond.
Yep. It's some kind of unobtainium solid surface underneath there that you just have no idea how you're going to get a drill into it.
And that's where I quite often use the SDS is if you happen to hit a brick line that's just so solid and the combi's just not making a dent on it.
Yeah.
And I'll switch over to the SDS. But Victorian properties are oh man. Yeah, there's some stories.
Oh, if those walls could talk. Yeah. They'd say, get off me.
Yeah, don't touch. Don't touch. All my mortar's turned into just sand.
Yes.
What else did we get a question about?
We got another question about came out along the cheap tools lines, and actually came out from an email conversation that I was having with my pal Tom Kitchen. Hi, Tom. And it was about cheap tools, and he was asking, if does a cheap tool somehow become a professional tool if a professional's using it? And conversely, does a professional tool become an amateur tool if a weekend warrior, a keen DIYer is using it? And I think the professionalism comes from within. Whatever we use, we will turn into a professional tool. But I think that it's a bit like professional cameras versus amateur cameras. They're built to different standards. Professional drill, for example, is going to be made to be used far, far more than any DIY hobby type drill. If you think, if you drill a hole in the wall, say, how long is that going to take? 30 seconds, a minute? It's quite possible that a DIY drill, a cheaper sort of own brand, probably only has an honest to goodness use life of 20 minutes, half an hour. How many drills would you be expected to drill in the course of half an hour or an hour of actual use? Probably more than a lifetime's worth for many people who are just, need to put a hole in the wall of the garage to hang the Hoover on or whatever.
I mean, there's definitely a lot of vanity in tool use, professional tool use. But it's from exactly the same perspective as you're saying from a photography standpoint. If Aldi brought out the best camera in the world, you wouldn't turn up to someone's wedding with a camera with Aldi written on it, would you? You would just...
Not unless you covered it in black tape first.
Yeah, exactly. So there's certain things where... And it's probably only in our heads because the customer doesn't know the difference between a cheap brand and an expensive brand, but
no,
I guess it gives you that confidence that, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I've bought a Festool or a DeWalt or a Makita as opposed to I'm not going to single out embarrassingly bad brands.
I was going to say, almost said the WorkZone word.
Well, we'll say WorkZone.
Yeah, WorkZone or Parkside. For what they do,
they're sold by a supermarket at the end of the day, aren't they? So, but I couldn't turn up to a customer job using a full set of WorkZone tools, even if they didn't.
They'd match.
Yeah, they all match. But even if the customer didn't have a care in the world, I would be slightly, and I know it's wrong to say this, but I would be slightly embarrassed turning up to a professional job where I'm getting paid a good amount of money for doing that job and I'm using the cheapest of the cheap tools, because it just puts across the wrong image, I think. And I know that's probably not the right attitude to have. And if a tool does the job and if it's good quality, then what difference does it make? But yeah. So to answer Tom's question, I don't think cheap tools become professional tools if a pro uses them, generally. I don't think.
No, although a cheap tool can produce professional results as a result of that professional, there is a physical, the mean time between failure kind of thing. That life expectancy of the tool is obviously less. But I don't think, or let's just say, a little drill drills a better hole than a Festool drill. You can get all nitpicky about it and whether the drill run out is perfectly concentric, so you don't get any slight drill wobble. But then most of the holes that I drill don't need to be exactly 5.5 millimeters wide. They, anywhere between 5 and 6 will do, sort of thing.
Well, that's it. If it's a pilot hole or a clearance hole, you don't need to be that accurate most of the time. As long as the centre of it is accurate, that's a bit that matters. Yeah. But whether it's 5.5 or 5.6 or 5.7 millimeters for a pilot hole for, whatever, a Euro cabinet hinge screws or whatever, it's not going to make really any difference to the strength.
Exactly.
But I think it harks back as well to something that we've definitely talked about on a previous episode, which is you can have a reputation for doing a really good job. You can have a reputation for always being finished on time. You can have a reputation for being really clean when you're working. You can have all these different... You can have a reputation for being really good at working with MDF, or reputation for being really good at working with solid oak. If you've developed a reputation for being cheap, that's a very hard reputation to shake off. And I think that applies to everything. If your fundamental reputation is all around your price and how cheap you can possibly be, which, let's face it, work zone tools generally are, ultimately that's what sticks in the back of your mind, that they're not being designed to be good tools, they're being designed to be cheap tools. And if some of them happen to be good tools, that's a bonus. But I think it's one of the things where shaking off that reputation of cheapness, and that's why I always say don't compete on price, because it's a forever losing battle, because you will only end up getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper until you completely go out of business, and then you will forever be known as that person who was really cheap. You will never be known as that person who was really good.
Yeah.
And that's not, in my view, a good route to go down.
No, indeed. No. When we're talking about our work, then certainly you don't want to be vying to be the cheapest person on the block. I used to tell, if ever customers ask me for my best price, or the cheapest, we're really tight on budget, we need to be really as careful as we can with the cash. I always used to say, I'm happy to give you a quote, an estimate, and I'm happy for it to be a competitive estimate, but I'll guarantee that it won't be the cheapest price you get. I can't guarantee it'll be the most expensive, but I'll guarantee it won't be the cheapest. And it was like, oh.
It's interesting. You ran a thing on your YouTube a little while ago about day rates and how much to charge for jobs and things. And one of my latest, I put out a Patreon video on Tuesday, which was...
Yeah, I saw that.
It was just another job costing video, but I got everyone to give a guess of how much they thought these units could be. So I got quite a wide range of guesses on how long the job would have taken, and guesses on what the day rate should have been, who maybe people who didn't know what my day rate was, or what they would have charged based on their day rate. And I always think it's fascinating, the range of rates that you get coming in, from people charging £100 a day through to people charging 600 Australian dollars a day, which I'm not sure what that is, but it's a lot more than £100. I think that's probably about £300 or £400 a day.
Yeah.
And as I say, in the States, I've regularly seen craftsmen, carpenters charging £500 to £750 a day. Dollars a day.
Dollars, yeah.
So that range of prices that people are charging from £100, I do not understand how you can have a functional business, a functional joinery business, while running a vehicle and possibly a workshop and all your tools at £100 a day. You can't be...
Even if you're working every single day, that's $3,000 a month maximum of fee income that you can generate.
Yeah.
And if you're just working during the week, that's $2,000. That's not sustainable. That's, as a business, you can't run a workshop and your vehicles and all the rest of it on that sort of income. You just can't.
Not a chance. And it's always interesting when you get these, and then, as I say, going through the higher range prices as well. And we've effectively got a 5-fold increase between the lowest and the highest, possibly sometimes more. Sometimes people charging £600-700 a day. And bear in mind, that's not a lot of money these days. You check what solicitors are charging and what...
500, 600, 700 an hour.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, back in IT days, 15 years ago, we would regularly charge customers £1,000 a day for a senior engineer's time. Sometimes £1,500 a day for a senior network consultant, and this kind of understanding that people have got that £100 a day is somehow a good wage. No, you cannot run a business at that sort of rate and be bringing... I would love to know behind the scenes what their actual take-home wage is from that on a yearly basis, because it can't be more than 5 or 10 grand a year that they're bringing out of that.
And the thing that always cracks me up is when you hear people, because I did something similar as well. I did a job costing on a glorified shed, basically, a while back, and like yourself, wide-ranging prices, anything from £1,000 to £5,000, and the finished price was about closer to 3 that I quoted. But the amazing thing that always cracks me up is when you get people commenting and they say, "Oh, well, you can't charge that around here." How do you know? Have you tried?
Yeah.
And overwhelmingly, it seems to be the general idea that you can't charge that round here, and then that's what they think.
And you know what it is? At the moment, there's a massive skills shortage, and I know there's people out there who are struggling to find work, and maybe that's not a price problem. That's something else that you need to look into, because there's tons of work out there at the moment. Now, maybe it'll not always stay like that, but if you've got lower rates, now is the time to put them up. Market demands. If you've got too much work coming in and you can't handle it, this is how the market has to react. And if people are just sitting on a wage that they've been charging for the last 20 years and they've never put their rates up because they've been frightened of the potential knock-on effects of losing work, well, guess what? Everyone else on the entire planet, inflation happens and prices go up, and you've got to react to those conditions. Otherwise, you're going to be on minimum wage for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I was putting an estimate together the other day. In fact, this sort of study spare room thing, and I think I mentioned in the last podcast when we were talking about accounts and businessy type stuff. I was using an invoicing package which forced me to put sort of set prices in for things. And I was using that to put this price together. I was looking at it thinking, actually, I haven't looked at these prices for a while. That's way too low. So I bumped them all up by a decent chunk. And the cost has been approved without even a murmur. No questioning at all. So, yeah, keep an eye on your prices. Incidentally, I must say, and I apologise, I haven't forwarded this to you because I've been reading it and rereading it myself. Joey Chalk over at Kingbo's Timberworks, after the other podcast, episode 13, where we talked about businessy type stuff, he sent me a fantastic written piece that he's done about the business of woodworking. I haven't forwarded it to you yet, and my apologies, I will do, and perhaps we'll have a chat about that in the next podcast.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
It's well worth a read, and a big shout out and thank you to Joey for forwarding that to me, because it's a really, really great read and really nicely written. I don't know. I'll have a chat with him and we'll see if we can make it available online, or if he's made it available online, and other folks can get a look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I look forward to having a look at that. That would be really interesting.
He was a drummer.
Was he?
Yeah.
Oh, well. Oh, cool.
Played in a band.
Fellow drummer.
Recorded an album. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, there's potential news on that side of things for me. So,
oh, really?
Well, we'll see whether or not I get my.
You're going to do that difficult second album yourself, are you?
I might have to. Yeah. I might be picking the sticks up again. I haven't played the drums for 9 months, and I'm so out of practice. But I might. We'll see. We'll watch this space. I'd love to get back in a band again.
Yeah. Tell me something. So one little other thing, because I know we're getting on a bit. Which I had on my topic list, and it occurred to me the other day. I really like Instagram. I'm really enjoying Instagram. It's got me interested in putting pictures up every day again, and it's got me interested in taking pictures more. Because I used to be a photographer, I'm sort of fairly visual, and when I walk down the street, I see pictures happening in front of me all the time. I was in my wife's sewing room the other day, and there was got some really nice light at this time of year anyway. And there was a couple of scraps of fabric on a cutting board, and I've got a little pot of pins. I just fiddled with it, arranged it, and took a little picture. It's something I really enjoy doing. As a musician, as a drummer, when you walk down the street, do you hear beats and rhythms all the time?
Yes.
Yeah. It's like a kind of Tourette's, isn't it? You just can't help it.
Yeah.
They're just there.
I find sometimes even if I'm just walking along and there's no background noise, I start walking along to the speed of whatever tune is playing in my head at that time sometimes, and yep. Completely unconsciously. And then it's like you suddenly realise that you're walking in step with the tune that's playing in your head.
Yeah.
I also find it impossible.
And people are crossing the street to avoid you.
Yeah, it's like, especially on like those thrash metal tunes when they start like kicking in. And I also find it impossible to listen to a piece of music on the radio without trying to work out what time signature it's in, if it's in an unusual time signature, which is pretty rare. Normally they're all just 4/4 straight rock beats and stuff, but sometimes you'll get the odd little gem that comes out. And I remember when I think it was Paranoid Android by Radiohead when that came out.
I was going to say there must be Radiohead in there.
Yeah, I remember when that came out, and that's got a lot of time signature changes in it, and all I could do whenever it came in was my brain would just instantly switch from whatever I was doing into time signature recognition mode and trying to work, that's a bar of like 7/4 and then a bar of 4/4 and then like, it's going into 11 there, that's a bit weird. And then suddenly you realise that you should really be concentrating on driving.
And everything goes to 11, mate, I tell you.
Yeah, yes, it's got to. But absolutely, it's one of those things that I think it just gets so ingrained in your thinking.
Yeah.
That it just becomes like an unconscious thing that you're not even thinking about after a while, and it's a funny thing. But yeah, it'd be good to cover off that post next time. We can also maybe have a look. I think today we're probably not going to have enough time, but we've got a good question through from Mark Hanna asking about time-served carpentry and whether it's ever been a problem that we aren't time-served carpenters, whatever time-served carpenters means.
Yeah.
Because I've heard various definitions of what a time-served carpenter is.
Yeah.
And that is quite a big topic, I think. So
that was a great question that came in from Mark Hanna via our Patreon page, of course. You can, of course, contact us through our Patreon at patreon.com/Measuring Up Podcast. You can contact us through Twitter, of course, Measuring Up PC on Twitter, or through Instagram at Measuring Up Podcast. There's always email as well, of course. contact@measuringuppodcast.com will always reach us. You can reach me through my YouTube channel at 10minuteworkshop.tv. Andy, what's yours?
And mine's Gosforth Handyman on YouTube and Gosforth Andy on Twitter. You'll just search for Gosforth Handyman. You'll find it.
Yeah, the only oddity for me is 10 Minute Shop on Twitter rather than Workshop, because Twitter. But that's it for this week, I think.
Yes, have we got a few shout-outs?
That's it for this week. Yes, from our point of view, we do need to give a few shout-outs to all you lovely people. Thank you, everybody, for listening, of course. We have 127 5-star reviews on iTunes at the moment. If you can spare the time, please do rate us or review us on iTunes. It really helps push the podcast up the stack and makes it easier for other people to find. We mentioned our Patreon supporters. We want to thank our special Patreon supporters, starting with Douglas Deal, Thistle Do, Brendan from the Shades Workshop, Tim Bowers, Adrian Millington, Chris Davison, Paul Gardner, Eddie Carroll, James Hewitt, Carl Pountney, Steve Avery, and Peter Tone. And
we'd also definitely like to thank Owen Bullock, Tony Carnell, Adam Padley, Christopher Mark Duthie, Max Vietz, Mark Duff, Ben Harker, Harry Capper, John T. Lynch, Duncan, Chris Stokesmore, and Ben Campbell. So thank you especially to all those guys who are, and everyone on Patreon who is helping to keep the lights on the show. And of course, if you do support the show on Patreon, you get access to our special secret after show that we'll be moving over to very, very shortly. And it's just an extra 15 minutes of us rambling on about stuff that doesn't make it into the main show.
Absolutely. So yes, we need to probably get on with that, don't we, as the day is slipping through our fingers already. So thank you very much for listening. We look forward to seeing you next time.
And we'll see you on the after show if you're on Patreon.
Bye.
Bye.